Welcome back to the Modern Day Way podcast. Today we're going to talk about the fabric of a real mixed use project, one that we're doing here in town, and discuss the general makeup, what goes into it, and some of the exciting or not so exciting processes that it takes to execute. So we're doing a project on Shoto Avenue, adjacent to the Lafayette Square district. It's technically in downtown West by zoning, but by land use, it really is Lafayette Square because where the railroad tracks are located and things like that. And so it's become a part of the Lafayette Square community for over 20 years. It housed a restaurant called Vinda, which was very popular in the St. Louis community, as well as a number of event spaces, PW Pizza, and at one point 21st Street Brewery as well. And so when we looked at this building, it was after it suffered a fire in 2022, and the owner put it on the market and then had someone reach out to me because he knew of our historic renovation background and our design forward thinking, and as well as my background in the bar and beverage and restaurant industries. And we walked the building and I saw an incredible slate, not a blank slate, but an incredible slate to work off of and really see something that we could build back for the community. It was a building that was set to be condemned. It was going to be torn down, which would have been horrific. It's funny that we talk about, how many buildings are stuck from being demoed because somebody thinks it has relevance. Many a time it's, not relevant enough to stop progress. This one was definitely not one of those. It was one that should not be torn down. And we were really intrigued and interested in coming up with a creative way to save this building. So it started, the conversation started all the way back in the end of 2023. And Paul and Wendy worked with us tirelessly for about 8 months to make sure that we had all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, meaning all of the commercial spaces were fully leased out before we even closed on the project, because that was something that was needed to pencil in today's economy with the price of construction and things like that. So I'll lay out the fabric and we'll get into some of the details. The building that's being delivered right now has a restaurant on the first floor that is an expanded version of where the PW Pizza space was previously. It's called Extra Wavy. It's being opened by the two guys that own Yellow Belly in Central West End and Lazy Tiger, and have opened Retreat Gastropub, as well as a deli on Morgan Ford. So they're very well versed in restaurants in the St. Louis community. And that was a big, important piece for us on who we were going to bring in. We also have 7 event spaces, including a speakeasy bar that'll be located in the building called Prohibition. And we have 12 loft apartments on the second floor, in addition to a penthouse that takes about half of the third floor. And that sits adjacent to a couple of event spaces, including a rooftop deck that is one of only 2 rooftop decks in all of St. Louis that has a view of the arch. That's a wedding venue. So we're really excited about those deliveries. And on a personal note, my architecture and construction company are both officing out of the building. So we're really excited to bring this project to St. Louis, but also for it to be our new home.
It'd be pretty awesome for lunch breaks.
Yes, it will.
This is really a beautiful deal. I mean, at the end of the day, when we got started doing business together heavily, and you had this project underway, I was like, I think you might be a little crazy, but
That's probably true.
it's about as cool as it can get. And the opportunities that you're opening up, the doors that you're opening up for these restaurants, for, just the location in general. I mean, saving this building is something that needed to happen. And so not only did you save this old, gorgeous, historic building, you also made it totally, integrated into the community again. So it's a beautiful deal that is definitely up there on the difficult list.
Seriously. The difficult
difficult list.
It is.
So I've got a difficult list, and that's up there on it. Okay.
Yeah, the level of difficulty on this one is not low. It's a fully sprinkled 150-year-old heavy timber structure building. There's a lot of things going on between the 3 levels over a basement. So you've got 4.5 stories of conditioned space. It's 46,000 square feet. We reference it as a small city when we talk about doing
Seriously.
all of the things that we're doing in the building. And, there's a lot of analysis and a lot of understanding that goes into looking at things like, what are we allowed to do with the building from a historic standpoint? It takes historic tax credits to be able to pencil these deals, right? So we got our historic tax credits. The building was already on the registry. It's officially known as the Centennial Malt House. It was built in 1876, the 100-year anniversary of the United States. So that's how they branded the building and how it lists on the registry. And so we look at things like historic ramifications, and there's a set list both at federal and state levels of what we can and cannot touch, what we have to keep exposed. And oftentimes there's direct contradictions to building codes today in how we build stuff currently versus what we're allowed to expose, uncover, and or mandated to expose based on those historic items. And so it's a very unique puzzle is the way I like to look at it. It's not a normal, ground up construction is much, much simpler and straightforward. I've done quite a bit of that in my career. And renovations, people think, well, you're starting with something, so you just fill it in. And it's kind of like, well, that's true on a jigsaw puzzle if all the pieces are laid out for you. But when you have to invent the pieces and fit them inside the box, it's a lot harder than your box being able to move. And so delivering a current product with modern living amenities, things like laundry in the units, and doing all of that while staying within the confines of the historic restrictions, the existing building envelope. Yeah, the difficulty level is not low on this one.
The art that it takes to put a deal together like this is something that you don't understand unless you've put a deal together like this. And I have personally not, but I've watched it happen a couple of times, and it is a marathon. It is not a sprint.
As well.
It is a marathon, and
It is.
it is super cool. And ultimately, it's going to be super cool when it's done too.
Yeah. So you guys are 2.5 weeks out from being pretty much wrapped up with the project. When are some of these businesses set to open? When can people, sit down in the restaurant or the speakeasy for the first time, or host an event at one of the, event spaces?
So the restaurant is targeting some soft openings kind of late September, doing some staff testing, some dry runs. We will have the speakeasy do soft openings and dry runs beginning of October. The units will be live by that point as well above. We will only be kind of punching out, as we refer to the final touches on the penthouse in those final, next 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And the event spaces are already borderline occupiable. So those are about ready to be launched. And so all of this stuff kind of happens one after the other. And there was an intention to that. When we originally set up our schedule, we planned on kind of opening things a month at a time, and started that opening about a month ago was the original anticipation, but that we would delay openings of certain spaces as things would proceed. And lo and behold, one of our consultants had a misstep and missed one of the details on the fact that there was a federal and state requirement. And so we previously had been told we could open spaces a piece at a time from the federal requirements and our tax credits. And there was a miss that based on when our tax credits were awarded, all of the state has to be open and occupied on the same date. You can't phase those things.
Interesting.
And we found that out this year. So there was quite the audible, and realizing that, okay, instead of targeting this, getting it open first, and then moving on to these other spaces, we have to bring everything together at the same time. Which if you plan it out originally, you can do that. If you plan it to phase it, you can do that. But changing that mid-course is a little bit of some hurdles and some extracurricular activities into determining how we set that up. And so that's ultimately where we landed on this kind of late September, early October open date for everything, and had made adjustments to make that possible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, making adjustments to make that possible is difficult.
It's our job.
I mean, it is our job, but I mean, to be able to have one, expectation set and plan around that, and then have to have a direction change. Okay, I mean, you're going one way down the highway, and you got to go the other way down the highway, backtrack a little bit, and then, catch yourself up to speed on those projects that were, a little behind intentionally.
Yeah.
And so ultimately that's that's from a cost perspective, that is ugly. But then also from a timeline perspective, because when you're talking about time in these transactions, the cost is all wrapped into that.
Yeah.
And if you can't open up one space, you're losing very significant amount of money in rent on one of those units.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's 100% true. And we were very fortunate that the deal for it to happen on happened to be the deal where we are doing all of the design, all of the construction, all of the development. And so being able to prioritize internally and make those adjustments are different. And it's not speaking against working with contractors outside of your envelope, but businesses are businesses. And if you go to a contractor that has a scope of work and has a schedule, and you go in halfway through the project and you say, hey, the schedule's totally changed, priorities adjusted, I need you to rework this to hit this instead, there is either time or money that's lost in that transaction. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes both, right? And so being on the side of delivering and executing the project made it possible. Didn't necessarily make it easy, but it made it at least possible for us to make those adjustments and be able to hit the targets that we're hitting right now and, change our focus where it needed to be changed.
Mm-hmm. And time is money.
Absolutely.
Would you say that was the biggest challenge at the process, or is there something else that you can point to that was even more difficult than that? Or where do we even get started with challenges of a project like this, right?
There were a number of challenges. We had a couple of people break contracts due to things that happened on their side that were kind of uncontrolled life events. And so there was a number of pivots that happened to the project. And I would say that this entire project, the execution of it is only possible because the amount of flexibility and pivoting that happened. We had an investor who had to pull out last minute right before the building closed, and we had to scramble to find a different investor 2 weeks before we were closing a multi-million-dollar deal. And that's a big piece of the equation, is putting those things together. After we opened, we had permits and we had things set up, and then St. Louis City came back to us and said, hey, we messed up. We didn't require something we were supposed to require. We know you're already 30% done with this side of the project, but we need you to go back and get us all this extra information and these extra drawings. And we had to pivot in order to do that. We had somebody who was working as a consultant on the design side that took a certain approach that was inlaid in that city, kind of backtracking and realizing they needed additional information, that we had to pull out that approach and go a completely different way. Instead of individual units and zoning certain areas of the building, we had to go to large RTUs to deal with fresh air requirements and things that are, again, based on today's code and weren't necessarily built for historic buildings. When people built stuff 100 years ago, it breathed, right? Brick walls, air moves through those. Old windows, they tend to bleed air, and that allows that fresh air to kind of circulate and be pulled in and pushed out. And with today's envelopes, everything is made so tight that you have to actually bring in fresh air to a building so you don't have sick building syndrome. Well, they don't change the codes just because your building's that old breathable building. And so there are a lot of pivots that happened, and it was throughout the process, from before we closed to as we were, working through these mechanical requests from the city, all the way until building the entire second level, and then having somebody approach us mid-project and say, I'd really like to rent a penthouse. Can you convert these units upstairs into one large unit? And the answer typically is no, but if you agree to the right lease for the right amount of money and you've got the right amount of stability and guarantor behind that, we pivoted to make that make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the story of the entire project, is pivoting and flexibility.
Well, no difficult task doesn't come with lessons, right?
That's correct.
What are some of the biggest takeaways or, areas of growth that you could come out of the other side of this and say, point to that and say, if nothing else, I learned this key lesson?
There's probably a number of lessons. A few of them is a lesson that was relearned. So we have a tendency to only work with people that we have relationships with for a number of reasons. We've talked about this on the subcontractor level in the past, but I think that extends out. That extends to banks, investors, it extends to subcontractors, it extends to tenants. It's all kinds of things. And if you can work with people you have relationships with, I think it really removes some of those pivots. And that was one of the items that we relearned very early on, was because of our background, the size of projects we've owned in the past. We've completed projects of this size on the design level and on the construction level. But being an owner in this project, when we had the pivot with the investor, we realized that if you don't work with somebody or don't have a working relationship with them and a history with them, you have to treat it differently. When I started working in construction before architecture school and we're in these industries, there were a lot more handshake deals. And we all know that that's changed significantly over the last 20 and 30 years, especially in cities. There's a lot of rural towns that still kind of operate that way, but we've seen that adjustment. And what we've learned is you have to lock things up in a different way when the people that you're working with do not have a relationship that they could tarnish by making an adjustment or backing out or things
There's
like
less
that.
skin in the game if you have to back out at the last minute.
That's right.
Because it costs you,
Yep.
But when you work with people that you have a relationship with, there's at least the underlying element of, I'm gonna do Rich right.
Yep.
I'm gonna honor my word.
Yep. And I think that same thing happens with scope of work and contracts and subs. We had a lesson relearned on this one where we've worked with some people many times on different scales of projects, and taking the approach of we'll work together and we'll figure this out is a great team mentality. But the problem is on the back end, if there's anything that isn't understood, or if there's anything that has gone back on in terms of the conversation of taking you at your word, if you don't have those things documented and written down and signed and executed, it creates an opportunity for not only somebody to go back on it, but even for there to be a misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
And when those things happen, it's incredibly rare that misunderstanding falls on the person that you hired. It almost exclusively falls on the building owner. And we see that when we're designers, we see that when we're working as contractors for other groups. We have a lot of people that come in and say, oh, this guy gave me this bid and we're going to work it out. And even if it comes in with some change orders, we'll still be in the ballpark. And our conversation is always the same. Make sure you get it in writing. Make sure you get the scope defined so that when that conversation happens later, it's a correct and accurate conversation. And it's not saying, well, I said this and you said this. That's something that we've just seen become a significantly bigger hurdle in the past 20 years than it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Working with subs you trust. And even when, you've worked with somebody in the past, making sure you trust them.
Yeah.
That's hard to do.
And it goes both directions. I mean, it's for the benefit of our subs as well. If they come in and do a bunch of work and we say, well, you're also supposed to do this, this, and this because it's adjacent. And they're like, well, we didn't have that in our bid, or we didn't have that in X. That can create problems for them. It can create problems for us. Sometimes it's shared problems. Nobody wants to get into that space. So having a clear and defined scope, in our opinion, is the best way to limit any kind of negative conversations down the road. It doesn't mean you're not going to have things that pop up that weren't expected, especially in old historic buildings. You open walls up and something's there you didn't think was there or couldn't have known was there. There are going to be adjustments, and that's why we have contingency, in projects. But knowing what should be contingency and what isn't, I think is key to doing anything complex.
How do you learn that? Is that experience? Is that expertise? Hiring the right, contractor? What lets you know how to budget that contingency when you're talking about a project that's that big?
There's rules of thumb. A lot of people will take a 10 or 15% contingency on something of this complication level. But the reality is, and I hate this answer because when I was a young architect, I really hated the conversation where people said, well, you just can't learn 20 years experience till you have 20 years experience. It's like, no, if I'm hungry and I'm willing to work and I have the work ethic, like, let me get there. Like, show me what I need to know and I will absorb it. I will study. I will do what I need to do. And when that's not a possibility because you can't possibly know all the things that will go wrong until you've experienced them, it's a hard fact, but the reality is you can't replace experience. You can speed it up a little bit. You do more project and a bigger variety of projects, and you work with more different kinds of people. You can speed up that experience. What some people learn in 30 years, some people can learn in 15. It depends on, what their book of work looks like, but you can't replace it. And there's really no way to just say, I want to gain 20 years of experience tomorrow. It doesn't matter how hard you study or how much work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that leans itself to what you asked is hiring the right people with that experience helps you avoid some of those pitfalls. You yourself having that experience is invaluable, but bringing the right people to the table with the right levels of experience, the right backgrounds, and knowing how to do it right, it's huge. And sometimes that's knowing how to do it right in that area. There are different requirements based on municipalities in St. Louis. There's different requirements based on states. We know all of these things just because there's different codes in different areas of the country. So making sure that you're absorbing and learning, I will say the lesson you never forget is the mistake you make. So it's really hard to replicate that, but getting the right people around you is a good way to help soften the blow, or at least reduce the number of times that you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The lesson you never forget is the mistake that you made. And
Absolutely.
that's huge. I mean, it definitely equates back to my life in a variety of circumstances that I've walked into, and you learn from those ones because they're the hard lessons.
Yep.
Now, I mean, there's so many different opportunities in knowing which opportunity to say yes to, which opportunity to say no to, but then falling in love with a vision ultimately is when you can say yes. And you guys fell in love with this vision, right? It wasn't even necessarily the financing behind it, right? Or like the money behind it, the investment side of things. It was a love for a vision because, with your design and your architecture experience, you're an artist. And I mean, with your wife running a couple of the event spaces and, being able to have the connections to actually pull this off and not doing it for the financial gain, but doing it for the community and doing it for the itch of your vision behind it. And that's a lot of the times what drives a project like this to completion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If we did this,
when you have a project that's difficult, I'm not speaking from experience here. When you have a project that's difficult, I would imagine the only way you can actually get through it is if you have a greater purpose than just wanting to make a buck at the end of it.
Absolutely.
If you weren't really passionate about the event spaces, the restaurants, the speakeasy that we're going to end up ultimately getting to thrive in that environment, it probably would have been easy to throw the towel in a half a dozen times throughout the way. There's an easier way to get a paycheck than going through that,
If we were doing this for the money, I would have done 6 other projects before this one.
6 new constructions that you could have done, while you were asleep.
Yep. No, that's 100% true. And on deals that are this creative and this complex, it's usually the other end of the other end of the extreme. And a lot of deals in development, you don't see any money on for a number of years. So a lot of people don't realize that when you build a new apartment building, the time it takes when you make your money is when you recapitalize for the most part. Some people don't even make money then. They only make money when they sell it. It really depends on the structure of the deal. But this is a good example of a deal that, to pay back the investors that are involved, to make sure everything was done, to bring the amount of knowledge and execution to the table to get all of the businesses open and cover their tenant infill and do all of those things. The money return on this project is 3 to 4, maybe 5 years out. Now, it does have a lot of upside in the future. That was something that intrigued us, but no, you're absolutely right. If this was about making money, this is not the project we would have done. We did it because we believe in what it was for the community and the hole that it left. We believe in what it can come back as. And we are very strong believers that in urban fabric, mixed use buildings are the biggest anchors where people live, work, and play. That is what creates an urban environment. And that is the thing that we see as one of the biggest needs and hopefully one of the biggest upswings in the St. Louis community.
Mm-hmm. It's how you stabilize a community.
Yeah. We look at, and we've referenced this in other podcasts, but we look at communities, areas, cities that have been successful for a long, long time. And if you look at places that people have wanted to live, chosen to live, and have thrived for not just years, but generations, you look at Paris and Amsterdam and, towns, especially unique towns all over Italy, whether you're going to Florence or Sicily, they all have some unique, category about them that makes people want to live there, makes people want to go visit there. And one of the things that we see in almost every European, Eastern Asian city that has grown year after year after year and has sustained generations is this mixed use urban environment where people are walking around and visiting shops and living over the top of businesses or coffee shops or what have you. And this very, pedestrian scale, people interact with one another kind of environment.
Mm-hmm. People interacting with each other, people feeling, they can walk out of their front door and what they want is 400 steps or 200 steps in either direction.
Yeah.
And that's why they live there.
Yeah.
You have people who want to live in the mountains or in the woods or, whatever
Absolutely.
It might be. Right.
Yeah.
You have people who want to live around other people.
Yep.
And they want to be encapsulated in a community that they feel like they can thrive in, that they thoroughly enjoy. And something that St. Louis is lacking in a lot of ways is the ability to live right next to your favorite restaurant, like right next to it, maybe above it in this case. You live, in an area where your best friend lives a block away, your other best friend lives 2 blocks away, and your guys' combined favorite restaurant is underneath you.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
There's a couple places like that in St. Louis, and I think everybody recognizes those. It's Central West End, it's Del Mar, and probably Lafayette now more and more.
Yeah.
Particularly after this development. But those are the neighborhoods that everybody recognizes in St. Louis. Clearly people flock to those areas for a reason.
Yes.
And again, it's the community feeling that those provide that makes people so attracted to living there.
It absolutely does. And the statistics don't lie. Most people live in cities, right? Urbanization is a very real thing. Young people have a tendency to go to the cities more than anywhere else in the country. And COVID had a unique reset where more people moved out. Remote jobs became a thing. People moved to lower cost areas and were able to work, really significant pay salaries off site. And that did change things a little bit. But as a society, when you look at what people crave, look at the shows that stood the test of time through the 90s and the early 2000s. Friends, they lived above the coffee shop. How I Met Your Mother, the bar was downstairs. Like the places that people crave and that they, in some level, idolize, which is probably too strong of a word, but they want to go towards that. Those are the places that you have 4 friends that live within the building that you're in, and you all walk down to the coffee shop or across the street to the bar or, over to the restaurant. Those are the types of places that people dream about when we're talking about society as a whole. Like Sam said, there's people that want to live in the mountains and the woods. And there's a lot of times where I want to go disappear in the woods for a week or so. And I absolutely understand that. And there's a real beauty and serenity to those things. If we're talking about daily life and what you want to do every day with your spouse, your significant other, your kids, your friends, that is a conversation. Is a lot of people want to have adjacency to things they want to be at, right? And the move to suburbia is largely about schools. It's largely about not having your kids in a city. It's largely about discussions of crime rate and safety and things like that. It's not because people don't want to be around those amenities. It's because there were other things that got flagged that pushed them into other spaces. I don't think most people would tell you that they prefer suburbia. Most people are going to tell you they'd rather be out in the middle of nowhere or they'd rather be in the city. The reason so many people are in ring areas and suburbs are because they're looking for that blend of being able to drive in and do all the things they want, but be far enough out that they can have the school that they want and have a garage that fits 2 vehicles and a backyard. And there really is this kind of unique situation that's created almost a no man's land where people live in areas that they'd rather have something else here or rather be farther out, but it's because they're finding a happy medium. And what we're really focusing on are the young professionals, the empty nesters, the people that want that adjacency and really want that true urban living.
So the people call these third places, right? Like you've got home and you've got work, and then a lot of people that are happiest have a third spot that they go to with friends. That's just a community. It's either a coffee shop or a bar, or maybe it's the gym for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's that area where you can be at rest, not at work, not at home, but in an environment where you can socialize. And it just feels like a part of daily life rather than some place you have to go as an event. It's just a place where you can naturally be and hang out and be a community.
Absolutely. I mean, sense of community extends outside of your front door by definition.
It does. You have to open the door to get there, no matter what.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to open the door and have it right in front of your face.
Yeah, it is. I've had the opportunity to live in a lot of different environments. I've lived in the urban centers, in the apartments that were a block away from the restaurant or the coffee shop or what have you, and I've lived on a dairy farm that was sitting on almost 100 acres, where your next neighbor, you borderline have to drive to go get to their house. And I've lived in the suburbs, and I got to see the pros and cons of each. And I saw why some people like to live out in the middle of nowhere. I saw why some people want to live in the city. I saw why some people try to compromise and live in the suburbs. I didn't see anything that really made me say everyone should want to move here.
That's why you're moving back to Shaw.
which is why we're moving back to the city. We lived in Central West End for a number of years, lived in that urban environment. When COVID happened and started shutting everything down, we had family in the suburbs, and we moved out to be close to family, that we could still have some kind of community, some kind of interactivity. And we did that for a few years, and my wife and I both looked at each other and we said, we need to get back to the city. Like, this is not us. This is not what we want our lifestyle to be. And so, yeah, somebody found us a house in the city, much quicker than I thought he would. And so we are moving back to the city. We've already closed on the house. We're going through a little bit of a renovation update, and we will officially be back inside St. Louis city limits.
I didn't just make an announcement I wasn't supposed to.
No.
A little bit of a renovation.
A little bit of a renovation.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit for us.
Yeah.
Do we want to detour and talk about that, or another episode?
We can.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful home. I mean, it had actually been on the market for a while when I sent it to you.
Yes.
And it was unique. I mean, I saw it and I was like, okay, well, first off, why isn't this selling?
Yep.
And then second off, there's 2 lots here where Rich could put a 3-car garage.
Which was one of my requirements, right? I said I want a big enough yard for the dogs. I want a house we can grow into. So when we have kids, we're not looking to move immediately. And I wanted a 3-car garage because my wife and I both have a vehicle, and I have motorcycles, and I wanted those to be secured and covered for weather, as well as we're in the city, right? That's just part of the equation and part of the conversation. And Sam knew, and I didn't give him this on the list, but as an architect and as a builder, character is an important part of what we look for. We did not want to just find a big kind of cookie cutter builder home on a lot that we could throw a 3-car garage. And the key point for us was we want to be in an area that we want to be in. And so you already mentioned a few of them: Central West End, Lafayette Square. A lot of people on the Loop. Now that's more urban. There's not really houses on the Loop unless you go to DeBoliver, right? And Shaw is one of those neighborhoods. It's incredibly walkable. It's a great street with a cul-de-sac. It's private enough, but it's still that urban environment where we can walk 6 houses down and hit a bar or a pub with, pizza and food and things like that. And it really was the perfect house. And it happened to be an 1891 Victorian with beautiful brick, and was renovated in the 90s. So the new plumbing and the new electrical made it a very doable project. We didn't have to gut the whole thing for modern amenities, and all of those check boxes came in line.
Your personal house project makes me jealous right now with the personal house project I have going on. So, yes.
Your personal house project's also very cool, but we had different requirements. We were open to living in the city and figuring out the school situation in the future. You guys wanted to be in the Lindbergh School District, and that has its own restrictions. Obviously, the area is isolated to the school district boundaries.
Mhm.
And so, there are two different approaches and two different set of requirements. You have more space than I do. You have a much bigger lot than we do.
I don't have angels carved into my brick.
Well,
Okay.
No gargoyles for sale.
No.
Although it's not too late.
Hey, yeah, right.
Gargoyles too.
I mean,
Construction project.
yeah, if I'm gonna carve angels in brick right now, it might cost me $100,000 a brick. So
that's right. No, we're incredibly excited about the move. It's a really beautiful house, and we could not be more excited to move back into the city. And for those who don't live in St. Louis, to find a house that is large enough to get up to the 5-6 bedroom count, that can get a 3+ car garage on it and have a yard and be in a neighborhood you want to live in, that's not an easy checklist. There are very few of those houses, and most of them start to run very close, if not over $1 million. And with all of the projects we have going on and all of the things that we have invested in different areas, that was not a budget we were willing to commit to. So finding something that entry level was sub $500,000 and checks all those boxes is, in my opinion, what I thought was going to be a 12 to 18 month ask and near impossible. And when I got the text about 2 weeks later that said, "I found your house," I was quite shocked. And we walked it, and you were absolutely right. And that's why we pulled the trigger.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and we didn't know before we went to go look at it. You never know what you're walking into. But we both texted each other right beforehand. We're like, "I'm actually excited to look at this."
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I thought it was going to be a disaster inside, and it really wasn't. The couple took very good care of the house. They were only moving because they needed to go to a ranch instead of a multi-story. It was just good timing, and it was unique. You mentioned it was on the market, and we couldn't figure out why no one had offered on it. And the key was it was listed as multifamily because it had an in-laws suite below. And so people were reading it as a duplex, but really it was a full house over a suite, and it was only separated by one wall. So it's a very, very easy conversion to single family. But a lot of people look at it and they go, "Well, it doesn't check my single family box," so they move past it. You look at it for multifamily, it's like, this is not an investment property. I'm not going to rent out this entire house upstairs for a reasonable price and then have this 2-bed, 1-bath unit down below. And so that detracted a lot of people and left it on the market and made the price palatable. And it's just right time, right place.
And there's drywall.
Yeah, it's not
drywall.
plaster.
There's drywall. Like, what? Is that Romex electrical?
Yeah.
In a house?
Yeah. Full PVC.
That we're buying?
Yeah.
I don't think we're actually doing renovations too as well.
Yeah, so it was done in the early 90s, which probably carried over from the late 80s in terms of style. There's definitely some very 80s into 90s stylistic choices and bathrooms and kitchens and things like that. So
full tile.
Yeah. We're making some adjustments to the finishes, and we're very, very excited for what it's going to look like at the end.
I love that. I was thinking about it for a second right here, and I was like, I've never purchased a renovation or a house in general with Romex electrical. I was like, it's Novatube or aluminum.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's probably right. I don't think I've ever done a renovation that had new electrical in it.
Right.
Ever.
I mean,
nope.
There's a big, if you don't know the difference here, it's big when it comes to electrical, what it takes to swap out electrical.
Yep.
And I was just thinking about go work on your project. This is a personal project, I'm not too intertwined in it.
Yeah.
Since it's your personal home, and I'm like thinking about the construction budget on that. I'm like, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, PVC is the same conversation. How many houses have we bought that we've renovated that came with a new PVC stack? I mean, that's rare in itself. I mean, new sewers is generally an assumed line item on anything we purchase.
I replace 30 to 50 sewers a year between my clients and the projects I do. I mean, that's absurd. And if you're working with somebody who's not telling you to get a sewer scope out there, get a sewer scope.
Don't work with them.
And yeah, don't work with, well, for one, yeah. But I mean, clay and cast iron sewer lines, they can still function as they should. Now, if you start having issues, those issues just get worse. But can't beat PVC.
No, and a lot of people think, well, you have to replace cast iron when it's 100 years old. These houses were built in 1910, 1920. We've done multiple houses that were built in the 60s that we had to replace the cast iron stack. That's not uncommon at all. And so for people to think like, well, age is the biggest factor in that, age is a factor, but it's not the only one. And, you know, going into something and assuming, well, if this was built in 65, then I don't have to replace any of the infrastructure, is usually an incorrect assumption.
Right.
I just did it. House built in the 70s.
Yeah.
Actually. Cast iron stack. And it was quite DIY'd as well. It was pretty funny.
Yep.
But those cast iron stacks, you know, they leak into the 70s. When did they introduce PVC?
PVC would have been, it probably became common practice around the 80s. I'd have to fact check that. Yeah, I'd have to fact check that. But by the mid 80s, I think most things were PVC.
Yeah, I've seen it in like the late 70s, I want to say.
Yeah, I'm sure it was introduced around that time. But
yeah.
Yep.
Still, they've changed it a lot throughout the years. And just because the material looks cheaper, which it may be cheaper, doesn't mean that it's not better.
No, it's about corrosion and other things, right? Like, there's all kinds of things that go into evaluating the longevity of houses. There's a big conversation about houses don't get built the same way today as they did previously, right? We touched on that in a previous episode. That same conversation happens with other things. We learn more about materials. We've invented new materials, you know, in our lifetime, let alone, you know, shortly before. And looking at what we've learned today and making better, more informed decisions. I mean, there's no comparison to say, well, this house lasted 100 years. It's like, yes, it did. And had it had a PV stack in it, which didn't exist when it was built, that plumbing would have lasted another 100. You wouldn't have to replace it right now. And that's great. Unfortunately, all the wood walls will be gone by the time that PVC breaks down in most new builds. But that is, you know, all of these things are different pieces of the equation.
They are. I think my biggest pet peeve with the current building code, that doesn't have to do too much with even the framing, really, or with anything MEP, mechanical, electrical, or plumbing related, is typically the foundation and what, you know, the codes are at that point in that municipality. And is that house built on farmland, or was it farmland? And how recently was it, you know, active farmland, and has that soil settled? What's the sediment around it look like? And are they doing the real testing they should? Because if they're building a 6-inch foundation on it, it better be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I see a lot of problems with the new construction.
And part of it is, yes, the size of the foundation. You've also got different sack mixes on concrete. There's a lot of tweaks and adjustments that can be made to improve longevity or encourage sustainability, or encourage longevity, but also reduce, you know, settling and things like that. And all of that kind of comes full circle. So we see a lot of people have a new idea, generally about building codes, because that's something that somebody gets paid for and they have to justify their job. So things change every year. That's why we see code cycles. And we've seen things happen. So sick building syndrome was not a thing until we created such tight envelopes in buildings that air could not move freely in and out. Now our heating and cooling bills got better, right? It became more sustainable in that way and became more efficient in that way. But then people were getting sick and nobody knew why. And it was because they were recycling the CO2 in the house all the time because there was no breathing to the house. And so now things have changed where some people actually build houses to breathe a little bit. And we have fresh air exchanges and other things that go to, you know, address that. But a DOAS unit, which is a fresh air intake unit, did not exist like far before our lifetimes, right? Because we didn't need them, because buildings weren't built so tight that you couldn't get fresh air in and out naturally. And so now we're changing codes again to deal with a code change that happened before. And that's the cycle we start seeing. There's some comments about bureaucracy and things around that as well, but
that's another podcast.
Well,
Rich, you got a lot of cool projects going on right now.
We do, and I will feel like they're a lot cooler when they're done.
Well, you're nearly across the finish line.
We're getting there.
It's cool to watch.
Absolutely.
the painting is almost completed.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. We're almost ready for moving.
Yeah. Well, Vindiset building, Malt House.
Yeah.
Is an artist's dream and
Or
bringing
nightmare.
or nightmare or combo.
Yeah.
Combo. I mean, a nightmare is still a dream.
Take that and quote it.
Yeah, take that how you want, right?
Yeah.
But so cool, and doing projects together is so fun. Now, excited for it all to come to fruition, including your personal house and everything that we got going on. So on to the next chapter.
That's right. On to the next chapter.
See you next time.